Men go mad.
Has gone mad.
Mad Men.
You're mad.
The man's mad.
Mad Men.
I'm mad.
All right. Hey, everybody. This is Samir, and we have a special guest for you guys today. We're going to be talking about influencer marketing, really getting into the evolution of it. And we have a really awesome guest who has been a friend of mine since college. We got Varun Jindal here. Varun is a seasoned marketer who's been on different sides of the business, from his early agency days at Dentsu to in-house at PepsiCo, and most recently at TikTok. In between, he managed to grow a little startup from the ground called Bali Shake. And today we're going to be talking about all things social and the growth fueled by influencers and creators. Welcome, Varun.
Hey, Samir, thanks for having me. I appreciate the intro, and it's really great to see you. And a fellow Longhorn, always appreciated.
Yeah, man. No, I appreciate you reaching out. You were one of the first people who reached out, congratulated us on the podcast, and offered up your time. So I'm grateful to have you and to take you up on that offer. I've been following you around LinkedIn. I've really been seeing kind of the thought leadership you've been putting in the market about social media and creators and influencers. And I feel like there's so much happening in the influencer space today. I only felt it right to be the main topic for us to talk about. And while we don't have Adil and Salim here today to talk about it with us, I would really love to pick your brain about the evolution of social media influencers. And, for you guys out there, we'll kind of walk you through the journey and the timeline from the near past of what influencer marketing is and, what it's going to become, or at least what we think of it. Varun, how did you get into this space?
Yeah, I always knew I wanted to do marketing and advertising. It's actually what I studied at UT, and I've been blessed to just work at different parts of the industry. Starting on like the media side, and I sort of just kind of got sorted into social. And social a decade ago was really pretty much just Facebook. This is before influencer marketing was even a thing. And when I was growing Bali Shake, a startup I co-founded, at the time there wasn't even like a real term for it. We were just doing community building. And in that process, I started to really understand, how do you work with people and creators of different sizes, and the role of authenticity when you're kind of doing storytelling through content. And then after that, just various roles just kind of put me in the thick of it. Um, and yeah, I just found myself very much immersed in the world of social and influencer. And now I worry, maybe I don't know if I'm getting too old for it now.
Yeah, I mean it's constantly changing, and it's a tough field. I think out of all of the marketing and advertising spaces you can specialize in, man, like influencer and social, it's the most fascinating because I feel like it changes so frequently.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's so much about social media that drives our culture.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of people might actually believe the opposite, that
Mhm.
your social presence or how you show up on social media should change with the times, when I actually feel like social media is what's driving the change, but how people are looking for authenticity and really wanting to change the way their online personal brand really looks and feels. I think it's such a big space to make a statement as a person, as a professional. And then what we're going to get into, how brands really engage with these individuals and what it means for them.
Yeah, for sure. And on a macro level, this thing has existed, right? Um, Billboards 40 or 50 years ago, um, whether it's celebrity, whether it's a brand spokesperson that was created, whether it's a mascot, there always has been this level of like a personal identity to a brand. And I think social gave an ecosystem for people to scale that, and I know we're going to kind of talk about where things were, where things are, and if we have a little bit of time, we can see if we can predict and forecast a little bit about what what's going to come up. I definitely have some thoughts and maybe hot takes, I suppose, and I'm excited to kind of chat about everything with you.
Awesome. Love it. Love it. Well, let's get into it.
Yeah.
Um, just to set us up here with some stats for you guys, 93% of marketers now practice influencer marketing, and 69% of marketers plan to increase their influencer marketing budget. So I think that's going to be telling about where the investments are being made, how important influencers and creators are to a brand strategy. And Varun, I think you put it right, very, very well about social media being the ecosystem, about how a brand can learn and show how they behave. I'm a big proponent of, brands should act and behave as if they were human. So when
Yes.
you think about the values, the tone, the visual identity, how they engage with others, social media is a great space to be able to demonstrate what type of human you want your brand to be. And I think, along with brands on social media, celebrities, especially on Instagram 10
Hmm.
years ago, really made a kind of that first big push into that influencer space. These were real people having real preferences, but had mass followings due to their fame. I think we can all kind of think about celebrities as influencers back when Nike and Pepsi started forming their partnerships with celebrities to advocate for their products in
Hmm.
exchange for that publicity. And then even big celebrity owned brands were made during this time period as well. This 2014 to 2016, we're talking about beauty brands like Rare Beauty from Selena Gomez. We've seen fashion brands come out of here as well from just having that creator network and that influencer network, really establishing and building these brands.
Yeah.
Um, what do you think is, one of the biggest pros of using celebrities as influencers during that time? And then what changed?
Yeah. I mean, if we rewind the clock back, right? Instagram was founded, I think, in 2010. It came on, I think, our radar maybe a year or two later, but leveraging celebrities in that way, like you said, it was 2014 to 16. I think originally those who were already spokespeople for a brand, um, the core marketing teams are looking at it as just another inventory source, right?
Mm.
Display was very hot at the time. Video, YouTube was king of video. So I imagine media planners at the time were um, maybe not even putting that much paid behind it. They were just saying, "Hey, we did this photo shoot with X celebrity. We're gonna slap it on billboards. We're gonna put it on subways. We're gonna do a TV shoot, put it in the magazines, and besides standard display posts, they're just gonna post it on their social. And in that process, as celebrities have garnered their fans turn to followers, that follower count goes up, and there was this obsession at the time of follower count. Every brand chased it. Every celebrity, everyone was just chasing that, which um, through one method or the other, and ultimately, what it led to is instead of a pre-existing relationship that a brand had with a celebrity, um, or doubling down on maybe a pre-existing love that a celebrity has for a certain product, without any expectation in return. Oh, I love Pop Tarts, or oh, I love Aesop, the hand lotion or soap. Um, brand marketers and planners said, why don't we flip it and say, we'll send you this product, we'll pay you for this endorsement. And they saw it as a much more cost efficient use of their dollars, compared to something that was a TV spot, which was a very expensive, it still is a very expensive placement.
Yeah. No, that's great. I think, establishing what the beginning of celebrity endorsements and what that meant on social media. I think I think eventually it seems like what happened, and this might be towards that end of that peak of celebrities on Instagram, is
Mm,
where if almost feel like celebrity endorsements and celebrities on Instagram started becoming less effective
mm,
because people couldn't always relate to that over the top lifestyle.
yeah.
Maybe there was a little bit of that, as a normal person, what I am posting on social media does
Mm,
not seem to be the type of thing that these celebrities do. So, and audiences weren't shy about calling out inauthentic endorsements, or
right.
really recognizing a force fitted brand who bought this particular placement or this partnership with a celebrity. And I feel
Hmm.
like that started where we started seeing some of the crumble of
Hmm.
celebrities on Instagram being brand endorsers,
Yeah.
and starting giving way to more of those authentic push, which I think is what we talk about a lot today.
Yeah, for sure. It's a fine line. I think celebrities were a great place to start because they had such a strong, um, size and scale. But I think it sort of just had this like trickle down effect, right? So you have whether it was just too expensive for brands or they didn't see the engagement they're looking for. You go from celebrities with 10 or 20 or 50 million followers, and you now have this entire pool of creators who are now in half a million, maybe quarter million followers. So there is still the element of aspirational. I think uh, we saw one big shift from celebrity to the first like Instagram influencer, somebody who started from zero and nobody knew, and they built this allure and illusion and look and feel of an aspirational lifestyle. And I really wanted to emphasize the aspirational part, because that is what floated influencers from 2016 through, I'd say, like 2018, 2019. Um, and in that time, you saw Instagram grow their product, dabble into video, step on Snapchat's feet with stories, which ended up being very successful for them. And I think the next big shift was when TikTok sort of grew alongside the pandemic. And then that shift took it from aspirational to relatable. And the
Mm.
relatable part is you don't need a fancy production team. You really can do it with your phone, and having some sort of connection and kinship with the creator ended up outperforming ended up outperforming what an aspirational creator had.
Yeah. No, I remember that period of time when, I think the brands and posts that were getting rewarded with exposure were those hyper polished, super perfect, those,
Yeah.
I mean, and Instagram was almost designed for that, right? It was a stage for the perfection. And
Mm-hmm.
until Instagram realized that, that was potentially garnishing and grabbing the wrong type of audiences,
Yeah.
and really limiting the reach when
Yeah.
this kind of question around authenticity was coming up. So then Instagram started changing their algorithm to
Yeah.
prioritize content that really focused on conversation, engagement, real connection. And then that's where
Yes.
that hyper polished content started losing that visibility. And I think as we get into that kind of TikTok space, I think it's a great generation for social influencers. Honestly, I feel like the aligning it with the pandemic, I think, is spot on about the kind of trajectory that TikTok got on because of the pandemic and through the
Yeah.
pandemic.
Yeah.
Short form video became the primary source of how people want to digest social content. People
Mm-hmm.
were ditching that perfection. It was much more casual and fun.
Mm-hmm.
And entertainment value became the driving force, right?
Oh, yeah.
Influencers who can make you laugh, make you cry, right? Dance or participate in a challenge. Like those were the creators that saw the most success.
Yeah.
And I feel like TikTok really flipped the influencer game, like almost seemed like overnight.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, just as someone who had worked at TikTok, we can kind of chat a little bit about that. But TikTok really centered themselves around the word creator. And by doing so, it sort of added um, this connotation of, like, that influencer has this sort of like tarnish on it, right? I don't want to be an influencer. Like, I'm a creator, right?
Mm,
There were people really had, they pride themselves on, like, their relatability, and they, sort of look down upon the influencer per se. But yeah, I am video is just, I've always been a huge um supporter of, like, user generated content, um big or small. And I think that was a big lesson I had just, like, learned with Bali Shake, the media company I used to, run. And we saw people of all sizes, and all followers see incredible engagement, and ways to, we as a company were essentially a bridge between creators and, brands and production companies. And um, people came together that way. And ultimately, especially coming after a couple of years going through the pandemic, people are looking for that connection, right? And
mm,
so, yeah, I think ultimately too, TikTok really ushered in a lot of cost efficiency, a lot of process efficiency for just creating content. Their algorithm is just wickedly good, like too good, I would say. Even prior to joining the company, you know, um, I had trouble, putting my phone down, or I had trouble, like, not scrolling when I was in bed, and so, um, it is, short form video is very powerful. I think it's, YouTube has been carrying the flag for video itself.
mhm,
um, but, ultimately, where we land today, and this is maybe a hot take, but every platform is now trying to do everything, and I think it is ruining the experience for everybody. And had everyone just stayed in their lane, I think people would still be on majority of these platforms and actually care. But it does feel a little muddy now because everyone is doing everything. And so, yeah, I think, but video still is a very powerful uh, vehicle for storytelling.
I'd love to click into that. What do you think is the one thing that TikTok is doing that you don't think it should? Now that you don't work there anymore, maybe you can talk about it.
Sure. I mean, ultimately, because I'm speaking from a place, there's a bias that I've worked in marketing and advertising. So I have always found that, when it comes to one's data, there's no secret that our phones, our devices, everything, they are, taking visual cues, audio cues from what we talk about. But ultimately, it's in service of serving the right ad at the right time. And some see that as, good, and some perceive that as bad, right? I personally don't see any malice in that, because if I'm going to receive an ad, I'd much rather receive an ad about something I care about. I like to travel. I like to collect watches. I'd much rather get that than an ad for, diapers, right? Which, I'm not married. I don't have any kids to my knowledge. Otherwise, if I'm getting those ads, I think I need to pick up the phone and call somebody, like, And so, that being said, there's definitely a lot of misinformation out there, I think, about, there's so much media coverage of TikTok, good and bad, that, a lot of times there's misinformation out there. And ultimately, TikTok is operating exactly like other platforms are. They are doing the exact same practices. I think where they get a little bit of an edge is, like, their algorithm is just really good,
Mm,
because they're not just spoon feeding you what you consume. they are in many ways, giving you a small test on, hey, this is something new. What are your thoughts on this? And it's tracking, how much do you really care about it, or how fast do you just kind of skip through it.
Mm,
So um, at the end of the day, users will gravitate to different platforms. TikTok is the flavor of now. It's impossible to predict what will happen. This year we have an election coming up, but there will constantly be new things. But I also sense on a larger, like, bird's eye view, that there is a little bit of a sense of user fatigue.
mm.
We've seen Facebook come and go, Elon taking over Twitter, making it X. Pinterest had a very strong performance and everything during the pandemic. They did very, very well. Saw explosive growth. Come and kind of gone. Snapchat, it's just kind of there. So I see a lot of younger people, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, who are not really on a lot of these platforms. They're trying to capture more of life in an analog capacity, which I'm not sure exactly what that means for social giants and advertisers, but I do see like kind of leveling out, plateauing, if you will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I love that. I love that. I think you're right about, TikTok really changing the game, and that algorithm is incredible. I think the way I would describe it is TikTok really democratized influencer marketing. And what I mean by that is, with the algorithm that it has, it really lowered the barrier for entry for a lot of creators to be able to find that
Mm-hmm.
massive reach and scale and exposure,
Mm-hmm.
where it was no longer tied to their follower account, right? I think that's the big difference between the traditional social media and TikTok, was how much of your content was limited by who you initially had gained as a follower.
Yeah.
But TikTok being such a fantastic discovery tool for content, and that's where, I mean, I think people are probably more on for you than they are on following, and that's intentional, right? Because I think everyone has, they want to be able to find new content that is outside of who they know they follow. And I
Mm-hmm.
think what that has done is allowed these smaller creators to partner with brands, and really, brands being able to reach those niche audiences, and generate a little bit of organic virality even at the smaller scale, because in TikTok anything can blow up. And I think that's something that was really missing in Instagram, in my opinion. But I think there is a con too with a lot of this, what TikTok content tends to be, and that it being short-lived trends and topics, right? Things can come and go. What is hot and popular 1 hour can be completely gone and ignored the next. And that makes it really difficult for brands to be able to capitalize on these things. So what's your take on that? How trends just seem to come and go, and challenges are just flying through, and what's viral, what's popular can change so quickly. How
Mm-hmm.
can a brand really capitalize on that?
Yeah, I think, to your point, TikTok is unique in that way, but also it still follows a pattern that every predecessor has followed as well. It's, Facebook, I think was very hot about 10 years ago, and people were really growing like crazy. This is the era of, like BuzzFeed and like Now This and those type of like videos, but um, it definitely started with Facebook, and the people who were on Facebook gravitated to Instagram. The problem is that you there is an inverse relationship between what the platforms want and what users want.
Mm,
So what I mean by that is that, all of these companies, they only have one business model: advertising, right? None of them have a membership or a subscription. So in order for them to make money, in order for them to have shareholders that are happy, they need to continue raising the bar. And the only way to do that is either serve more ads, or you charge more to advertisers. in that process, your feed is now getting infiltrated. So what you enjoyed about it is now starting to ruin the experience for you. And then at some point, users will then gravitate to the next platform that rewards organic growth the most. So that was your point about the virality. With TikTok, you have the highest chances of going viral, having your moment than any other platform, because organically, to get in front of people's eyeballs, it is close to impossible now. It really is.
Mhm.
So there is something to be said about an early mover advantage. If you adopt a feature or a platform early and test it aggressively, then you have a much better chance. It's putting in the reps.
Mm.
There is, having done this for over a decade, there is no method to the madness. It is equal part science, equal part art. And you, whether you're a brand or whether you're a creator, showing up authentically on the platform, which I know authenticity is a very overused word in our industry,
Mhm.
but ultimately it shouldn't feel so far out of left field, right? Ultimately, um, people don't want to be sold to, right? And that is not what advertisers want to hear. But how do you connect with your audience, with your loyal customers, even if it's a small number? Because I'd much rather have 100 people who are loyal and love everything I do and everything I post than 10,000 people who are just there. And I think that is, when follower count and the emphasis on it shifted to engagement rate, and the next level, I think, will be communities and micro communities, which we're already starting to see. And it's also why this year a lot of companies are starting to hire creators in house. So instead of scrambling every time you have something new and who do I send this to and everything, you now have a consistent face or a consistent voice in house who has skin in the game, and people can really connect with that person. Washington Post is a great example of that. Who would have thought that Washington Post would have one of the best TikTok game from the get-go? And we've also seen brands fumble, and it happened recently with Chick-fil-A,
Mm.
which, once the episode is out, I'm sure we can share a link and give some context there. But Chick-fil-A really dropped the ball when it came to recognition. When employees are sharing their love for a brand or product, they're not doing it to make 10 cents in ad revenue. They're doing it because they care. And instead of rewarding that, you are suppressing those voices. It was definitely a very big lesson to learn. And so now the future, I do think, is going to be communities, and I do see a lot of brands bringing people in house so that it doesn't feel unfamiliar. You start to build a relationship with, a certain persona. What was once, the Dos Equis guy, is now just, Varun or Samir working for X company.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think the in-house creator trend right now, I feel like it's such a powerful thing. So there's a trend kind of happening even across, outside of social media, but it's called being glass box brands, right? And
Okay.
it's this idea about, in this age of, radical transparency and just being a true and honest brand about who you are with your audience, brands are now making their internal culture part of their external brand, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I think we saw a little bit of this in the pandemic, where being able to access big house production just was not accessible. So then they turned an empty office into a creator studio, and
Yeah.
then we saw the giant Duolingo guy running around messing with everybody, right? Like, and,
Yeah.
it started, and like you said, like those employees, like even for big brands like Chick-fil-A who have field employees, right, working at the store level,
Yeah.
being able to garner and leverage them as a resource and a spokesperson or ambassador of the brand.
Yeah.
I think it's a really powerful thing, and I feel like it really gives a window into the company culture,
Yes.
which I felt like has always sort of been a hidden box, right? Versus an opposite of a glass box, right? I think
Yeah.
companies almost tried to hide what was happening behind their curtain because they were so obsessed with articulating that external image more
Mm.
than they cared about the internal. And there
Yeah.
was sort of this wall up. And I think in this age of being radically transparent and what consumers are expecting to see out of their brands,
Yeah.
breaking down that wall, creating a glass box about it, and then leveraging those in-house creators to be ambassadors of your brand, vouching for the culture that it has, and then
Mm.
also holding on to a little bit of that creative integrity that I think for
Yeah.
brands it could be a little bit scary when you
Yeah.
hire an external partner to go and create content for you. You are foregoing a certain level of creative ownership. But
Yeah.
if you bring that creator in house, help them understand how what that brand looks and feels and how they like to speak and what they like to be, you
Yes.
are now kind of establishing a little bit more of that control again, but still doing it in the voice of the creator. So
Yeah.
I completely hear you. I feel like this in-house creator piece is here to stay. I think it's a
Yeah.
fantastic approach.
I think it boils down to alignment, right? I think right now, as more and more brands explore bringing creators in house, 5 or 10 years ago, brands were considering bringing their own creative capabilities in house, and some found success in it, and some didn't. Um, and my one of my biggest the hill I'll die on, as I say, is like don't split your audience up. I think a lot of companies, they're like, well, we want to have our customer facing stuff here. We're going to create a separate profile as like an employer over here. It's all one and the same, right? If you create a product with integrity and you are uh, providing a good or service that makes people happy or enriches their lives, whatever you want to call it, it will attract the right talent, and so you don't need a careers social page. And I also, I wasn't a huge fan when the more pages you create, the more you're splitting up your audience, the more you're fragmenting your engagement. And so, if a company or brand is going to work with a creator, work with someone who just aligns with your mission and your product and your values. And that way it doesn't feel like that much of a stretch. No one's wondering, well, why is this person working with this person? And I think social listening is a very important component to this. I think historically it's been very manual. I think it will get easier and better to detect moments, right, that something is kind of trending or growing, because community managers, they can only scroll and prowl the internet for so long, and so through AI over the next couple of years, I think we're going to see some really cool solutions for picking up on. There could be very nuanced trends or something taking off, but it can make its way to the marketing team sooner, and that way they can respond. Yeah, I think some brands prioritizing social cannot be an afterthought, and the reason I call it social is very much where people are, like platforms, right? Before social, it was display, and then search was just Google. Search is now no longer Google, right? Search is, very much on TikTok, and now with all of these people, big and small, in AI, it's going to redefine search altogether. So, social and creators and partnerships, all of these things are part of a similar ecosystem. Um, it went from desktop to mobile. Mobile is kind of where most people are spending their time right now. my gut tells me the next frontier, if things go in the direction that they are, will be mixed reality and the headsets, and we're still 5 to 10 years away from that.
Hmm.
And but that I think is going to be like the next like playground, social playground, I think.
Yeah, thinking about, mixed reality through the lens of social or as
Mhm.
a social space is really interesting. I think,
Yeah.
with Apple's latest announcement around their VR headset, a lot of that focus was around productivity.
Mhm.
I think what we've seen Meta really double down on with Oculus is around gaming.
Mhm.
And I think you're right. I think there is something to say about whoever, or if it's one of them, or if it's another tech company that does double down on the mixed reality space, what
Mhm.
is going to be that hero social aspect, right? How can you start feeling present with others around you, right? And how you enable mixed reality to do that. I think it's a great point. I think I've sat in on some conferences that always talk about, what's the future of augmented reality, virtual reality, and
Mhm.
it's such a limited scope of what you can do as a brand, right? I think there's very
Yeah.
limited spaces that you can buy. I think the most interesting one I've seen is, in one of those kind of common virtual spaces where there's a bunch of different avatars that are plugged
Yeah.
in, and you can wear different virtual clothes. Over
Sure.
time, your virtual clothes get dirty, and
Yeah.
what you can do in the virtual world is go to a Tide store to get
Ah,
your clothes washed. And you're going to
interesting.
pay $1 or $2 to get it done. And I
Yeah.
think that's like, where you start seeing like brands starting to being a present there, or like you can hang out in the Modelo, like canopy area, right? Or like the bodega here. And
Yeah.
like that's where you kind of limited, but what you can start seeing from brands when VR and augmented reality, virtual reality start becoming more of a social space.
Yeah.
I think that's when you start unlocking even more brand opportunities in the future.
Yeah, it's also just showing up in people's lives in a more utilitarian capacity. And again, all of this is so much the Wild West that
Yeah.
I think in 5 years from now we'll have a much better grasp of the environment and like where things are headed. It's still too early to tell. Just like the first iPhone came out in 2007, real adoption and access, I mean, just from a cost standpoint, didn't really come for another 4 or 5 years, where people were able, now almost everyone has a smartphone. So the same thing goes right now. The price point and the access and the technology is just not there um, for mixed reality headsets. I think there's an endless amount, whether it's an apparel brand, whether it's home furnishings or automobile manufacturers. There's just a lot that can be done there. But I wanted to kind of bring back. I hope to see. I'm already seeing this digitally, but I'm seeing this also in an analog way. Communities and these like micro groups meeting up are starting to really take off. I have seen this in the second half of last year. You're seeing a huge rise in um, like supper clubs, dinner clubs, these meetups, these safe spaces for creativity, and whether travel groups and clubs. Brands that are smart, I think, will those who are leading the charge in creating these experiences, they will be the next like ambassadors for your brand. So I'll give you an example. In Austin, around the holidays, there's a really lovely group called ATX Supper Club, and that's been now around for about a year. They create these curated experiences with a theme, and the team, there's these couple people who lead it up. It's very food centric experiences. It brings people together, and so they have worked with some brands, I think, that are in like the liquor space or spirits space, to just show up that way. And they're very intimate environments, and it's a great way to give exposure. So no, it's not scalable beyond maybe 30 people, but if they're doing monthly events, that's one city, that's one group covered. I see a big one in Los Angeles start popping up, in Chicago and New York. I really do think that this idea of micro groups or micro communities, I don't think is going away. And I think uh, digitally, I think there's some opportunity to explore on Discord. I think I'm very like new to it, but it's something that has me wondering how groups like show up, and you're seeing a rise in even like writing blogs and Substacks and that sort of thing. So short form, TikTok was really they were really the quarterback to like lead that, carry that forward. But you are seeing a rise again in long form video, long form blogging, because people are just tired of being bombarded, and they're like, I really love this creator, I really love this publisher. I will spend 5 minutes, I'll spend 15 minutes or 20 minutes hearing this person talk about XYZ, or demonstrate how to prepare XYZ. So you are seeing, I mean, I think everything is cyclical. So we're going through, we're stepping out of short form, and you're seeing platforms do it too. TikTok now offers, I don't know if it's 12 minutes or 15 minutes. You can upload long videos now. So the scale is always kind of, the pendulum swings kind of back and forth a little bit.
Yeah. So it seems like it's a good idea to have a podcast when everything's going back to long form. People want to listen to us shoot the shit for a little bit longer.
And I'm
Uh,
glad you have a video component to yours, to be honest, Samir. I think it's a great way not to just limit yourself to the Spotify's and the podcasts. It really um, can give you a way to show up in different ways in different places. So yeah,
yeah.
I'm glad you're doing the visual component too.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it's always good to have that. One last topic that I'd love to talk about, and it's hard not to talk about it, especially what's happening today with hashtag Block Talk. This
Mm,
is relatively new to me,
okay. Yeah,
but
new to
as
me
of the
too.
last week, it seems like there's this big kind of revolution against influencers on social media. There's
Okay.
a lot of everyday people who are feeling like influencers now have too much power, too much influence, too much control,
Mm, okay.
and they're sitting at some very important tables,
Mm,
but they're not using their power for good. And it's sort of created this culture on TikTok to really go against these very powerful influencers now. And these are influencers of all types and sizes, right? All the way from Kim Kardashian all the way
okay.
down to this influencer, this content creator who's made its fame by having cooking videos. So I
Mm,
think I wanted to ask you, like, this trend seems to be a signal to us
mm,
about what the power of influencer marketing could be, and I think people are starting to revolt down to the point where they've put together the business side of things for influencers and realize that
mm,
these influencers are not using their power for good, but they're making money. The way they make money is by having so many followers and having all of this reach. So
yeah.
these are hundreds of thousands, maybe even up to millions of people at this point,
Yeah.
who are unfollowing and blocking
Okay.
influencers that they feel like should be doing good for the world but aren't, to try to
Yeah.
take away their value to brands. And it's
Interesting.
a really interesting understanding of influencers, right? Of
Mm,
these influencers would be nothing if it wasn't for the brand partnerships that they've had or the revenue streams that they have
mm,
access to, which is
mm.
purely dependent on their reach and likability. And people are taking a stand up against that. What do you think?
A lot of this is new to me, honestly. I think I've never honestly had the courage to like do content creation of my own, if I'm being honest. I have seen people start from zero and then rise to the top, and through various reasons they've found success in many ways defined, but they've also like the pressure of creating content, or you know somewhere along the way their authenticity gets sometimes compromised. Like it's it feels very like you can't have your cake and eat it too, right? Like it really boils down to like how real or honest is this creator being. And I know there's obviously disclaimers like, oh, if I was compensated for XYZ, but that is the name of the game. And truth be told, very 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 small amount of creators are doing this like full time. Most people, it's their side hustle. There's already, and this can be a topic for another day because there's a lot to be said there, but there's definitely a huge um, disconnect between like what creators of color and white creators are generating,
Hmm.
and men versus women, and I think that should certainly be addressed. But majority of creators are they're not doing this thing full time. It's a very I don't want to say impossible, but it is a very uh difficult and challenging journey that a creator goes through. And you've seen people of every type of content creation go through this. um I think like they, as long as there's honesty and transparency, that's all I can really say. Like if I were putting myself in the shoes of a creator, that is what I would want, right? um and but if they want to pursue this and make a living, then that is sort of like the name of the game, right? So I'm not sure. I'm actually really, you've given me some homework now. I actually want to dig into this a little bit because I honestly had no idea. I thought there's a lot of looming conversations about just TikTok as a brand, and we've seen sorry, TikTok as a company, and then we've seen brands have high moments and low moments. I think Stanley was a good example of that. They had this high moment when there was a girl whose video went viral and her Stanley Cup was fine after her car was on fire. But then there was like a separate sort of, hardly weeks or months later, um, this stuff around like lead and, the ingredients in their bottles. And so I think everyone goes through the highs and lows. I don't know. It's very hard to say, to be
Yeah.
honest. I don't think um people maybe are just sick and tired of being sold to, right? And I will say, algorithmically speaking, in the last 6 months, I have seen a shift. Like I've seen a shift in TikTok, and there's a very big emphasis on like TikTok Shop, and almost a lot of people are complaining that almost every other video is like TikTok Shop related, and so I can definitely see, like, I can certainly relate to, and like it resonates with me. But then I honestly, moving forward, just don't know, like, how do we fix this.
Hmm.
The one thing I'll say is that community building and audience building, I think, are two different things. Like building a community, I think like Nike has done a really wonderful job, them being Nike, of course. But at their core, they've really stayed to who they are, and platforms will come and go, right? Vine came and went, and Snapchat has come, and like, there's so many platforms that come and go, right? Um, they will continue to just be who they are, and those who are loyal to them, and I think they also do a good job about showing up in spaces with curiosity, and they show up asking more questions, and so that's why they're able to open more doors to like more sports and more supporting more people and stuff. So there isn't a right or wrong answer, to be honest.
Yeah.
I just hope that brands, creators, and even users, they communicate with integrity. The internet often is just like especially the comment section is always sometimes just a breeding ground of chaos and everything. But let's see. I personally am going through a kind of a strange journey, having done this for about 12 years now. um I Part of me is questioning, can I do this type of work effectively without being personally on platforms? Is that possible?
Mm.
So I might very well do kind of a social experiment there and see. Because I think it is false. You don't need to be on these platforms to work in this type of work,
Hmm.
and everything. And look, creators, they're not in the business to create. It's a means to get to XYZ, to make a living, to uh, build a relationship with a brand, to become an actor, to become a choreographer, whatever it is. Their end goal is not creating. So I'm curious, in the next couple of years, um, where things go.
Yeah. No, I think I really appreciate you joining us. I think we've, taken a little bit of a deep dive and flashback over the last 10 years, and, just acknowledging how much change we have seen in this space really feels like, gives you a little bit of a hint as to how much will continue to change in the next 10. And
Yeah,
we'd love to have you back to hear about your social experiment, and
yeah,
and really appreciate you joining us today.
yeah. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Varun. Well, take care, everybody. Appreciate you joining, and we'll see you next time.
Men go mad.
He's gone mad.
Madmen.
You're bad.
The man's mad.
Madmen.
I'm mad.